Hello, class. Today's a very exciting day in creative writing. You're going to write your very first story. Now, I'm going to tell you what the story is going to be about. That's the topic. And I'm going to help you with a few of your sentences. But you're going to need to decide on a title. You are going to need to add some more sentences, and you are going to be the author of today's story. All right, so today's story is about George Washington. One thing about a story that we haven't talked about yet is that a story has a beginning, middle, and end. Now, you know this, but you might not know that you know this. In my Google Classroom, I left a video for you to watch about the tortoise and the hare. This is a story that perhaps you've heard before, but maybe you didn't realize that as you listened to the story, there was a specific beginning, a specific middle, and a specific end that the author used as he wrote the story, and it helped us follow the storyline. This is what you need to think about when you write your story today. The beginning of a story lets us know who the story is going to be about. It creates a setting about where the story is happening. The middle of the story is where all the creativity starts. And in the middle of the story is where the author spends a lot of the time. Then as the story comes to a close, it's time to put in the ending. Something that tells your readers, all right, all the events that happened are about to finish, and you need to explain how the story ends. So another video that I have for you to watch is the book about George Washington. You need to read this book or listen to this video of the audiobook that I posted for you so that you can gather some information. So you do need to come up with a beginning, middle, and end, but in order to do that, we need to follow the 5 steps to the writing process. Do you remember what step 1 was? Gathering information, which is what you will do when you listen to the story about George Washington, our first president. Now, I've already watched the video, so I'm going to help you gather some information and form sentences. So you gather information and then you discuss. You kind of talk it through in your mind of which facts or useful information you want to include in your story. You can't include everything that you gather. A good author gathers more information than he really needs. So some information that I gathered was that George Washington was born February 22nd, 1732. He was born in Virginia. He lived in a farm, and he was honest. That's how he was described. He enjoyed making maps and surveying lands. Back then, there was a lot of time of war, and they would need somebody who was good at these things to help the armies be able to plan their next step. He did eventually get married. His wife's name was Martha. He was a soldier. Then he became a general, and he later became the first president of the United States. He is known as the father of our country. I gathered all that information by listening to the story that I left for you in Google Classroom. So you listen to it too, maybe you already did, and maybe some of the facts that I just told you, you remember. So I gathered information, I thought about some of the information that I gathered, and now it's time for me to write my sentences. Now remember, in this step, we're just getting it out on paper. It is just writing it, and we might need to go back and rewrite it later to make sure it looks nice and neat. So we're going to do this part together. I'm going to write it out on the board for you to see it. At home, you're going to copy the first 3 sentences that I write. You're going to copy that straight onto your nice story paper. When you come up with your own 2, you might want to do a little rough draft on a separate piece of paper as you're kind of forming your thoughts, because this paper will be graded and it will be graded for neatness. So don't write it on your George Washington paper until you know what you want to say, and so you can say it neatly. Now, what I have done, I'll show you here, is I created a little word bank. I'm calling it a creative corner, and I included that in Google Classroom too, so you don't have to worry about that. The things that I gathered from my listening to the George Washington story, I wrote down a couple of things to kind of get my thoughts moving on the story, on the sentences I wanted to do. Do you have your sentence buddy? I'm going to get mine. If you haven't made your sentence buddy yet, I encourage you to make one. They're so cute. And then they can be friends with my story buddy. The reason a story buddy is important is because it reminds us of the 3 things that I'm looking for in a sentence: a capital letter, punctuation, and a complete thought. You see how his green tummy is a complete thought? The dog ran. It has the macaroni and cheese. It tells me exactly what is going on. The dog, and what did he do? He ran. For a sentence to be complete, it needs to have a head and feet. Head is the capital, nice and tall. Feet are the punctuation marks, so it doesn't fall. Head, your turn. Feet, your turn. Together, head and feet to be complete. All right, now let's write some of those sentences. So I'm going to think about the information I gathered. I'm going to look at my Creative Corner word bank, and I'm going to come up with a complete thought. I have one. George Washington was born in 1732. That's going to be my first sentence. It's also going to be your first sentence, so you can write it if you want to while I'm writing it, but I don't want to distract you into neat writing, so maybe it will be easier for you to just watch me write it so you can see how the letters are formed, and then you write it after the video while you're working on your other 2 sentences. George, space, Washington. Now notice I capitalized George, the G, and I'm capitalizing the W because that is a name. You capitalize words at the beginning of a sentence, but you also capitalize somebody's name. George Washington was, space, that's a sight word, W-A-S, space, born. Don't forget the bucket on the B so that it doesn't look like an L. I don't have any more room. I don't know what your paper will look like, so you keep going if you can. Maybe you had to stop here. Whenever you come to the end, then you start at the beginning. Was born in space. Now we're going to write some numbers. 1732. Period, because that's the end of my sentence. My second sentence can start right next to it. Space, capital letter, he, space, grew. Gr in grin, oo in flew. Space, up, space, on, space, space, new line, farm. Period. I'm going to write 3 sentences. My third one is, he was a map maker. Capital H, he, space, was, space, space, map, app, space, maker. Period. I have 1, 2, 3 sentences. Let's read what I wrote. George Washington was born in 1732. He grew up on a farm. He was a map maker. So, the beginning. Well, I told you his name. I told you where he was born. That's pretty close to the beginning of his life. And I told you something that he likes to do. So I'm heading towards the middle of my story. Now it's your turn. You can keep adding to a little bit more of the middle, but then you also need to write about the end of his life, okay? So, George Washington was born in 1732. He grew up on a farm. He was a map maker. Now go to the Creative Corner word bank. I included some of these words for you in Google Classroom, and you think up a sentence. At this point, if your parents need to help you form those words into a complete thought, that's no problem. I would do the same if I could talk to you. So let them help you. They want you to do a good job, so accept their help. Now, I don't want to see any macaroni without the cheese. Do not just say, soldier, president. What? Soldier, president? No, that's not a complete thought. You could say, after you've written the 3 sentences that I wrote, then it's your turn. You could say, he was a soldier. Sentence 1. He became a president. Sentence 2. You could do that. Or you could come up with your own. Counting the 3 that I wrote, you write them, and then you do 2 more. So I need 5 altogether. You could do more if you have room and if you want to. Then you need to come up with a title. The title is on the other page. Well, obviously, a simple title would be the name of the person we're talking about. It could just be George, space, Washington. That would be a fine title. If I picked up your book, I would know that your book was about George Washington. Maybe you want it to be called First President. Ooh, if I picked up your book, I might say, ooh, this book is going to tell me who the first president was. I wonder who he was. Or the title of your book could be, let's think of a third one. I'm drawing a blank. I think I'll just leave it at 2. Maybe you can come up with one that I couldn't think of. Now, as I said, this is going to be counted as your handwriting grade. What am I grading? I am grading that you have 5 sentences. I am grading that you have a title. And I'm grading that your name is under the title where it says by. That means who's the author? You. You are the author. So I'm looking for those things. I'm also looking that every sentence has a capital letter and a punctuation. It also needs to be a complete thought. He was a map maker. You cannot just write map maker. That is just the macaroni. He was a map maker is macaroni and cheese, a complete thought. All right, I know you can do a good job. Then the last step is share it. So take a photo, send it to me in Google Classroom, and I can't wait to read your very first creative story. Do a good job. And remember, neatness also counts. So sit up straight in your chair, hold your pencil correctly, make sure it's nice and sharp. And since it's graded, I think you should try to get a piece of gum or candy while you're making it. All right, bye-bye.